What's happening, Bills Mafia? Ryan Thomas here, back again for another special episode of the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. Of course, I love to have guests on the show. That's the name of the podcast game. Oftentimes, you guys see me here riding solo, spitting hot takes, but tonight, I got an awesome guest on the show. Once again, back on the show, the Buffalo Nerd is here, Colt Schroeder. What's going on, Colt?
What's up, Ryan, man? Thanks a lot for having me back in. Obviously, this isn't my first rodeo. You've been on my show. I've been on this show. I'm really excited to sit down again with you this week and hang out with your, hopefully your fans are going to enjoy what we're going to give them today.
I think they will. They saw me last week on your show. It was awesome to be on your show as well. I really appreciate you having me on. And in the process of wrapping up your show, I said, hey, now I got to get you on mine. Have you on the other side of the fence. So we're switching sides here. I'm asking you the questions. I'll obviously fire my takes along the way. But Colt, how is things going for you? The Buffalo Nerd is doing really well. I'm happy that you're a part of the Buffalo Rumblings Podcast Network. Good buddy of mine, Joe Miller over there, Jay Spence over there, as well as yourself. You guys are firing on all cylinders. How's it going over there?
Yeah, man. I mean, it's incredible, right? And Bruce Nolan, Anthony Marino, and those guys over there. I mean, they put in all the legwork, right? To build up what Buffalo Rumblings is to this day. So I'm pretty blessed to have been brought in this season. Obviously the Nerd's been around, for I'm in my second season with the Nerd, but it's going to be a lot of fun. You mentioned Joe Miller, Jay Spence, Sterling's over there now. John Fina's there. I mean, it's just cool, right? I mean, it's fun. We're having a blast. The exposure's been great. So I'm super fired up for the season.
Yeah, I agree. As far as the fact that you're bumping elbows with guys like John Fina, as a part of the network, I think that gives the Buffalo Rumblings a little bit of an extra, a little bit of extra pep in their step. To have John Fina, I mean, one of the best offensive linemen of our era of Buffalo Bills football, as a part of the network, and he's got the Overreaction show with Joe Miller, and I've had Joe on the show a couple times, I've had Jay Spence on the show a couple times, and now I've had you on the show a couple times, so it's really cool to not only have a podcast, but to be able to network with guys such as yourself and those guys over at the network. Shout out to them. They're putting in a lot of awesome work, as well as yourself. So keep it up, buddy.
Yeah, a real funny story actually is Fina. I have not even reached out to him yet. I'm still starstruck about the idea, right? Like that he's in a group text thing with me that I'm part of and he's part of. I'm like, yeah, I haven't even reached out to him hey, you want to come on? Yeah, it's that kind of deal. So yeah, man, it's awesome. And those guys, it's been a real true blessing to be a part of that group so far. So I'm excited.
I bet. I've had a lot of discussions with John on Twitter, and I've talked with another former Buffalo Bill, Fred Smerlis, trying to get him on the show, trying to make that happen schedule-wise. So that's something to, as a little teaser for the Thomas Take listeners and viewers. But let's get right into it, Colt. Happy to have you here. The first question that I want to kind of touch up on you with, put it right at you, just throw it right at you real quick, is the position battles. Now, the reason I say position battles is due in large part that we're inching closer and closer to training camp, and it's something that I think every training camp is one where you do have those hard knocks type moments where someone's trying to make a really good roster. Can they make the roster? Who do they have to beat out? What are some positions on this roster as you look at the Buffalo Bills on paper? Who are some players that you say to yourself, this guy could possibly be on the bubble of making the team or not making the team on this roster so far, heading into training camp in a couple weeks here?
Yeah, it's a different situation for us now, right? Which is interesting because what we're going to talk about position battles, it's for depth, right? It's not even for guys that are really probably going to be making big time impacts. We're now in we're just stockpiling and we're talking about depth and who's going to be the guys that are going to make the cream of the crop, because that's what this team has become, right? So for me, it's really interesting to see what's going to happen in the bottom half of the wide receiver room. I think we're still searching, quite a bit in that area for what it is that we are absolutely going to need. So for me, the wide receivers at the bottom half are very interesting. Gabe Davis has been tremendous, right? And he's stepping in that same draft, though. We brought in like Isaiah Hodgins, and we haven't really been able to find a complete depth piece there. So for me, it's the wide receivers a bit. And you just saw we signed another offensive lineman today. So I'm very curious to see what the depth of the offensive line is going to look like for some of these guys who have been trickling around. And going into this offseason, I would have been like, they're going to make the roster. And now it's like, well, no, maybe they're not going to make the roster, And for me, it's, like the running backs coming in. Tavon Austin, I get it. I'm not sold that he's going to make the roster, right? I think if he comes in and he's productive at that return position, that he'll make the roster. But besides that, I don't know that we necessarily need him. So to me, it's a lot of like kind of, I don't want to call them no-name guys, but it's guys that are going to help us not necessarily this year, but next year and the year after.
I think that thus far, the proof is in the pudding that Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott leave no stone unturned. And I feel like this offseason, more than any other, you could argue, the Buffalo Bills are just adding and adding and adding. When, going into this offseason, we talked about it on your show, Colt, the Buffalo Nerd, that I didn't anticipate this offseason being one where Brandon Beane would just be adding a bunch of players. I thought their salary cap situation would kind of get in the way of that. But Brandon Beane, being the contract wizard that he is, didn't matter, didn't get in the way, and here we are, adding another offensive lineman, Van Rotten from the Jets, I believe, as a depth piece. And frankly, I think anytime you even see a depth move, anytime you see the Bills make any move, you have to look at your phone or you have to be wherever you are and just smile, because long gone are the days where the Bills are quote unquote desperate to sign such and such or desperate to go out and overpay for a player. I feel like they're methodically building this team up, even with depth pieces, as you mentioned. And you mentioned the wide receiver position. I can't remember a time where the wide receiver room was this talented and this young and this talented. Who are some guys that they have added, that are kind of, you mentioned Isaiah Hodgins, but who is one that you would say has the ability to not only make the team, but to really burst onto the scene in 2022, 2023 this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of us last season thought that would be Stevenson, right? I liked that pick last year. I thought he would be able to make a mark. You could see they were obviously trying to let him make a mark, right? They wanted him to be the guy, and it doesn't look like it's going to pan out all the way. I think that's why you see the Tavon Austin come into play. For me, the other guy, it's Shakir, right? You bring him in, he looks more capable to me of making the move the way that Gabe Davis did. I mean, Gabe Davis came from kind of a smaller school, right? But that team was super productive. He was super productive. Same deal here. Boise State it's not a big time school, but the kid was super productive. He's got a nice build. I think he's the type of guy that they've hit again. Right. But that makes guys like Kumaro start to feel like they can finally be moved on from, because I think we're keeping those guys around just because Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott like veteran depth, right? I mean, we just saw it with the signing today, and we're calling this offensive lineman a depth piece. I'm not sure that he's not going to be in the mix for a starting spot. I mean, he's been a starter in the NFL for the past couple of years. So we're calling it depth, but realistically, that guy could be that guy, right? But for me, that's the same thing. If the wide receiver room, I think we're still looking. I think it might take a free agent piece at some point coming in again. Like, I know people are having a hard time with the Crowder thing. I think it's a great signing. We've talked about that a little bit. And, to me, like you mentioned, the talent is across the board now. So you're going to have to be really good to make the bottom of this. And I think the draft pick this year is the guy. I think he's the next piece that will make the cut.
For so many years, too, we've looked at the special teams game. The game's three phases. And for so many years, I'd say mainly since the departure of Andre Roberts, which feels like it was a lot longer ago than it actually was, but that role has actually been a bit of a hole on this Bills roster. Isaiah McKenzie, I think, is too vital now in this offense to be playing that role to where, you could put him back there, but I see McKenzie lining up more as a wideout this year. Stevenson showed some decent things, but that is where I see the rookie wide receiver, 5th-round draft choice. If I'm mispronouncing the name, I apologize. I believe it's Khalil Shakur believe I'm saying that right.
Yeah,
Hopefully
I think
am.
so. Yeah.
So that's where I would love to see, not only in the wide receiver, at the wide receiver position on offense, but that's where I could definitely see a player like Shakur or as well as Tavon Austin, if in fact, Austin makes the team, making their impact. As far as on the other side of the ball, I should say, this defensive line with the improvements of Von Miller, with the improvements of overall defense with Kair Elam as well. How do you anticipate that CB2 battle breaking down with what presumes to be Elam as well as Dane Jackson? Or do you see that more as like Dane Jackson will be in certain down and distance situations, roles lined up schematically? How do you see that shaking out at the corner position?
Right. I mean, it all obviously banks on what happens on the other side, right?
Mm-hmm.
If T-Money comes back and he's looking good, then we have a true battle for number 2, I think. Right now, I'm not 100% convinced that we're looking at a true battle for number 2. I think we're looking at who's going to have to play 1 maybe for a little bit and who is the 2, right? But if we go to that battle, for me, I think what Leslie Frazier said about Dane Jackson is very accurate, that he looks good this offseason. He played well last year. They're going to give him the opportunity to be there, right? Just because they drafted, Elam with that first round pick doesn't mean they're just going to say, yes, you're the guy. Now, on the flip side of that, every other guy that we've drafted in the first round for the past few years has started and they've been successful. So if you look at it in that realm, now to piece what you said, could they come in packages? Potentially. I don't know that we necessarily want to rotate, but that is very much something that you could see them being comfortable with, as well as Dane played, right? And if the momentum is flowing and he's looking real good and Elam's having a little bit of a struggle that day or something, it's not a bad problem to have, but I don't think he's just going to walk away, right? Like the kid came out of nowhere as it is. He got his opportunity. He proved himself. He's not going to just walk away, right? So I don't know. I think it's so tough for them because Teron Johnson is so friggin' good at what he does that he's locked in, right? So you're either getting that spot or you're just a backup, right? It's hard.
And I didn't even mention Teron Johnson in this whole, kind of segment, due in large part to the fact that I have no fear of Teron Johnson not doing what he needs to field, because he's done it ever since they put him in that big nickel type role.
Yep.
He's filled those shoes very, very well, I should say. So the defense is something that I look at the whole roster top to bottom, and I've actually put a chart together of power rankings in terms of the team. I would say right now the best player on the roster, most important player, of course, is Josh Allen. But number 2 is Trey White. And to your point, if T-Money comes back as elite as he has been over the course of his career, a very young career at that, in the heart of his prime, this Buffalo Bills defense is much better. At the very least, they look so on paper with the addition of Von Miller. But Von Miller is at that point in his career where he's 32, 33, and we've invested quite a lot of young, draft capital. We've invested in a lot of young players at those pass rushing positions, namely Greg Rousseau and Boogie Basham. Sean McDermott is a genius in terms of how he does rotate that defensive line. But is there anyone on that defensive line that you would say is on the bubble with the talent that the Bills have on that defensive line unit?
Yeah, this is going to be interesting, right? Because we brought back Jordan Phillips, right? And we brought back Shaq Lawson, but we were willing to move on from them at one point or another, right? So to me, they need to play really well, right? They need to come in and they need to look very good because they weren't really part of our plan, right? We moved on. We were like, no, we're going to go find some younger guys, right? And we're going to go that route. And we've done that. Now, in turn, Phillips comes in and he's playing as well as he did the last year he was in Buffalo. I mean, let's not forget, he had like 9 sacks that season, right? So like he played well here in this system. So it's going to be interesting to see, because then that puts Basham and those guys who you've just brought in, the Epinezas of the world. I think you're really starting to see that this team becomes so good at so many positions that good guys are just going to not make it. And it could be guys that you just invested in a few years ago that it's just not working and somebody else is beating him out now. So I'm curious to see what happens with Epineza. Phillips, if he doesn't play well, Shaq Lawson, I don't think if he looks great, he might not be on this roster, even though he's back. And I like what they can do, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens with some of those guys. But when you bring in Settle, I think he's content. I think he's going to be here. As Joseph was the other, I think it's Joseph, right? Was the other guy that was brought in, and he's a monster. So you see who they went out and got. Phillips and Lawson kind of fell into our laps a little later on into it, where like, hey, they want to come back for how much? Yeah, why not? Let's see what happens.
It's an interesting point that you bring up in regards to the fact that we did move on from Shaq Lawson and we did move on from Jordan Phillips. So they actually have more to prove than some of those younger guys, or just as much, I should say, as those younger guys. And getting a player like Von Miller is so big for so many reasons that we talked about on your podcast in terms of the sheer greatness that he's been since day one, but as well as setting the expectation, right, of demanding the progress, demanding the work ethic, demanding that these guys show up each and every day trying to get better and trying to be as well a great teammate as Von Miller has been and as Von Miller has done. So I think Von Miller coming in, very interesting to see what type of players we see, what changes do we see from Greg Rousseau in terms of his improvement. What changes do we see in Boogie Basham, who I loved in college, who's somebody that I thought very well could have been a first-round pick. AJ Epinesa as well, a name that you mentioned that a lot of Bills fans are, on the fence on in terms of his production or lack thereof. They want to see more from him, as do I. But I definitely agree with you in the fact that we have so much talent. There's someone has to show up, obviously, and get those reps, and someone to obviously break through. No matter who and when will be very interesting, as we know. So talking about the position battles here with the Buffalo Bills upcoming training camp a few weeks away, at last, I cannot wait for that. But I have yet to discuss a topic that a few of my listeners and a few of my viewers wanted me to dive into with a guest on the show. They said, hey, next time you get a guest, let's talk about the AFC East outlook. Those are their exact words. That's why it's titled, hence, AFC East Outlook for the viewers of the show. So, last year the Buffalo Bills won the division by one game. The Patriots were in second place. The Dolphins were in third. And the Jets finished the season in fourth place of the AFC East. I don't have the records in front of me, but that's how it went down. And that's all that matters. Buffalo number one in your hearts and in the division. So
all that matters.
All that matters. So Colt, breaking down this AFC East this year. This AFC East is much, much different than it was last year. On paper, it's different, and every year is a different year. So that's why I'm saying that. But mainly on different due to the moves that the Miami Dolphins have made. Yes, the Jets made moves. The Patriots, they really didn't do a whole lot this offseason to write home about. So there's not a lot to discuss with the New England Patriots, believe it or not, when it comes to their offseason. But this AFC East outlook, I want to center it around the team that can challenge the Buffalo Bills. Who is that team? I believe it's the Miami Dolphins. And I want to ask you, the Tyreek Hill trade, they traded a lot. They gave him a lot. Upon trading for him, he was extended. The framework of that deal, as reported, was in the making for a long period of time. It's just that to us in the Twitter sphere, or to us, Facebook, or wherever you get your sports information, it came down relatively quickly. It was a matter of days, it seemed like that deal happened, but it actually was a series of weeks. Colt, what is your take on Tyreek Hill going from the AFC East, the AFC powerhouse, I should say, and the Kansas City Chiefs to the Miami Dolphins? And do you think this deal does make the Dolphins contenders or not?
Yeah, so I mean, if we go off of what Hill's saying, he's now playing with the most accurate quarterback that he's played with, right? So, with that being said, for me, I actually don't think that there's really anybody that's super competitive with us right now. The Dolphins will probably finish 2, But there's part of me that I talked about this last week. We did some over unders on the win totals for the AFC East. And right. So the Bills are at 11.5. We're saying over on that. 12 to 13 wins, right, is where we think the Bills will probably be again this season, I would think. So that's number one in the division. You've got the Patriots and you've got the Dolphins at 8.5. I think this is the year the Patriots fall to the ground, and I would take the under on that they get roughly 6 wins or so. The Dolphins, I think they're a 7-8 win team just because of purely of schedule and everything else. And I don't think that this Hill thing did enough to take them all the way because of the most accurate quarterback that he's ever played with has not shown me that he's capable of doing it yet all the way. Right. So I do think that they'll probably finish 2, but the surprise from the AFC East this year for me is going to be the Jets. They're at 5.5. I think they're going to get 6-7 wins this season and be way more competitive than people think they are, especially if Wilson can do okay. Because I think if I took Zach Wilson and put him on Miami with Tyreek Hill, I would feel better about Miami. I don't like Tua. He hasn't shown me anything to prove to me that he's capable of doing it. So I don't think they're there ready to challenge us. New coach that you usually don't get to just walk in and start dominating, right? Like it doesn't always work like that. So I think that's a struggle, and just it's young quarterbacks across the board against us, right? I mean, so it's growing pains up and down. So I would agree with you that overall the Dolphins would probably be the team that would finish 2 in the division. I actually feel this year it feels like we've got a little more separation than we did last year.
I love that take. And as you were talking about, the fact that if you had Zach Wilson as a quarterback on the Miami Dolphins, you'd feel more comfortable. I'm going to throw a curveball to the audience, and this is actually going to be a poll that I'm going to post. I think that there is a select few receivers in this league that you would consider truly elite. Like not there's but the top 5. I think the top 5 in today's NFL at the wide receiver position is far better than 6 to 10. I think there's a huge gap skill-wise. Me personally, just my opinion. And yes, I put Stephon Diggs in that top 5. Yes, I put Tyreek Hill there, Devontae Adams, Deebo Samuel. So I'd throw him in there as well. I would also throw in, I'm drawing a blank. We'll just say those 4 names. We'll say just lump those 4 names together right now just for the sake of the show and me drawing a blank. I will say that I would rather have Stephon Diggs than Tyreek Hill, set-wise. I would rather have Deebo Samuel than Tyreek Hill, and I would rather have Devontae Adams than Tyreek Hill. And it's not just based on, Tyreek Hill is I'm not knocking Tyreek Hill as a player. He's got a great skill set, but that skill set is very one-dimensional. There's not many plays that you can go back in Kansas City and say, what a miraculous catch Tyreek Hill made. We like Tyreek Hill based on his speed, his ability to run routes, his ability to stretch the field as a speed demon, where those guys, the route running, their speed, as well as their agility and their ability to go up and catch the ball in traffic, those aren't attributes that I see from Tyreek Hill. And I think those are attributes that Tua needs in a wide receiver, being that Tua is not the most accurate quarterback that is in the NFL, according to Tyreek Hill. I would completely disagree with that. And I'm glad you brought up the whole if Zach Wilson was in Miami situation, because it made me think, okay, you're drawing a parallel to the AFC East. But it's the AFC that we're talking about, a division within the AFC, a conference, rather, that got so much better over the course of this offseason in comparison to last year. The AFC West is going to be a dogfight. I couldn't tell you who will win that division. I couldn't tell you who's going to be the 4th place team in that division with a straight face. I honestly don't know. I think that division got much, much better. And Kansas City is still, obviously the team to beat in that division, rightfully so. But when I look at the AFC East, I do believe that this is the year that the Buffalo Bills actually separate themselves from the Dolphins, from the Jets, and from the Patriots. Over, under, I think the Bills are good for 13 wins. Over, under, I'd say Miami is at most 9. Over, under, I do think the New York Jets might actually, dare I say it, be much better than they've been in a very long time. I'm not saying that they're going to be a contender. Pump the brakes there with that. I'm not saying that. But the New York Jets have added a lot. I like their coach, which I've never said that my entire life, that I actually like their coach.
Their GM's great.
Their GM is awesome. So slowly but surely, slow but steady. They're going with the slow but steady always wins the race type thing. We'll see how that works out for them. But these Patriots, I mean, what describe the Patriots offseason to me in one word if you could. Like what's the word that comes to mind?
It's going to be 2 words, but it's a name.
Okay.
Matt Patricia is the offensive coordinator. Right? Like the greatest coach in the NFL could not get anybody else to come and be offensive coordinator. Like it just baffles me that they went to the guy who was the head coach of the Detroit Lions is going to be calling the plays. Right? It's like he went from Jared Goff to Mac Jones, and they're going to make Mac Jones Jared Goff. Right? Like this is like what feels like it's going to, and I'm all for it. Like, yeah, do that. I mean, it's about time you fall down to the bottom and you hang out down there for a while. I'm cool with that. But to me, that's just when you're hearing reports out of there that their own coaches are like, wait a second, what? Like, why? Like he was your defensive coordinator forever. And now he's the guy that's calling plays when you've actually brought in other guys who have not had great success in the NFL, but they're offensive coaches, right? Like to me, they killed 2 of the best tight ends in the league last year, right? Like, to me, I think Mac Jones I think we saw the best of it last year. Like I don't think it's ever going to be anything better than that. I think he can do that. And I think that could win, right, if you have enough things around it. But I don't think we're ever going to see anything better than that. And I don't even like Josh McDaniels or think he's that great of a coach. But come on, Matt Patricia.
I actually thought when I was seeing those articles, and people are gonna laugh when I say this, and sometimes I say things and people think I'm just being over exaggerating and making stuff up and being goofy. I'm not. I'm being dead ass honest when I say this. And that's a term I always say, dead ass honest. And serious when I say that when I go online and I see these articles and I see the reports of Matt Patricia being the offensive coordinator for the Patriots, I thought it was like The Onion or like right. one of those like satire, joke comedy, sport comedy, or Barstool Sports or something like that they were just throwing that out there as like a joke. Mm. And then I see that it's like, Yahoo Sports or ESPN or, like a sports brand that's reputable. Mm-hmm. And I say to myself, what the hell is going on? And I say to myself, the age-old question is being answered over and over and over and over again. Don't ask me who deserves more credit for the dynasty, Bill Belichick or Tom Brady. The question has been answered a lot over the last 3 years. And I know, people could say, well, Belichick's one of the greatest coaches of all time. True. Wouldn't disagree with you there. But look at what has happened to the Patriots since Tom Brady left. I mean, guys don't want to come there. Free agents don't want to play there. Free agents that do agree to sign with the Patriots sign for crazy money. Hunter Henry, Jonnu Smith, making all that money as tight ends. I think the Patriots' days are over. I really do. I don't really know why Bill Belichick is holding on and still coaching. I thought when Brady left, they draft Mac. Maybe he'd coach Mac for a season and then bounce. So maybe Bill Belichick is actually wearing out his welcome in the NFL, and he should actually go away. Because the team he's going to leave the team in shambles. I think he's not the ending is not going to be a swan song. Carry him off the field as a champion ending like it is for most legendary coaches. So we'll see. I do believe Miami got better, but if you're a Dolphins fan out there and you watch this show and you say, hey, if Tua doesn't work out, we got another two first round draft picks next year. That's not a good look. That's not good. That's not good. That's bad. You missed on quarterback, so you got to take a new one with a first round pick again. Only 3-4 years later. That's very bad. So the Buffalo Bills are the king of the AFC East, the beast of the AFC East again. I don't see it changing anytime.
Agreed for this season for sure.
Yes. So moving on from that, I told you I was going to hit you with this one before we went on the air.
Yeah, I know.
And this is a tough one because we got, a little bit of time here as we wrap up the show. Your top 5 NFL quarterback power rankings. These are the top 5 quarterbacks. You don't have to even necessarily name them like this is the fifth best, fourth best. Just give me 5 quarterbacks that you believe are the 5 best quarterbacks in the NFL as it stands currently, and I'll give you mine.
Okay.
I might have, who knows?
Mine is going to probably be a little bit of, because I kind of am thinking of who I would take right now, right? If I was just going to move forward with who I would take right now, but for sure, Brady and Rodgers are in there. You could probably, it's tough to call them like how you would flip flop them just because Brady has so much more, but I think Rodgers is that good. They're kind of like a 1A, 1B almost, something in kind of that realm. I think they're there. Then in the next little kind of tier, it gets a little interesting, right? I mean, Mahomes, I feel like has to be in there. I'm not sold on him all the time. I think at times he looks a little lackluster, but he proves it on the field more often than not. So he's got to be in there. Josh Allen has to be in the mix now. He's consecutively proving it, and he's getting better and better as you move through the seasons. And that's where I kind of get into like some muddy waters, because there's part of me that wants to put like Russell Wilson in there. And that's kind of going off of old Russell Wilson. I haven't seen it in a while. So if I was thinking more new school, Justin Herbert, I think, is a phenomenal quarterback. He's developing at the same pace as Josh Allen, or even maybe a little faster. Didn't have as big of a jump to make. But he's there. I'm not a big Kyler guy. I don't really like it. It feels too scrambly for me all the time. If you start just kind of wandering around, there's just not like Lamar. You just start feeling like you start hitting some guys where they're just like, they're really good at one thing and they're not overall just great. Right. And to me, that's where you start losing it. Like I would almost say like a Matt Ryan would be ahead of a Lamar for me. He can never run, but I would take him with Lamar I would take him with the same wide receivers and put them on the same field with the same opportunity. And I bet Matt Ryan could actually win more or as much as Lamar. Right. And that's just kind of where I am. But Brady, Mahomes, Rodgers, Allen, and probably Justin Herbert for me right now. Did you mute yourself?
I did. I muted myself. My bad. I've had a little bit of a sinus cough the last few days, so I muted myself so I didn't cough on the air for you folks. Forgot to turn my mic back on.
Make it sound like you didn't like any of my guys. You're still covering them all up.
Right. I will say that my top 5 are the same. I would say my top 5 are the exact same, but I will let's just throw Brady and Rodgers aside for being the dusty old farts that they are. And Tom Brady, I think he's playing with fire a little bit. Dare I say it? If anyone could play with fire and fight Father Time, it's Tom Brady. But dare I say it, he might be playing with fire a little bit. I talked about that in a previous podcast. Aaron Rodgers, I think, is due for a regression, due in large part to the fact that Davante Adams is gone, as well as the fact that the Green Bay Packers just simply don't know what they're doing. I think they've had a real tough time figuring out who to put around Rodgers, as Rodgers has shown his frustrations over the years with that contract, turned the frown upside down. That's another story for another day. You notice once he got that contract, I'm a Green Bay Packer for life.
Oh, yeah, everything's great again.
Everything's sunshine and rainbows for Aaron Rodgers now, but neither here nor there. But let's just throw Tom Brady and Rodgers aside and say that the top 5 for me should be, without a doubt, Josh Allen, Pat Mahomes, Justin Herbert, as well as the man out of Cincinnati, Joe Burrow. Mm-hmm. And I think a guy that has never gotten the credit that he deserves in the NFL, and he's a reigning Super Bowl champion, Matt Stafford. I've always loved Matt Stafford. I've always felt like Matt Stafford never got the props that he deserves, and that was in large part to the fact that he was in Detroit, which is always the Siberia of the NFL. And now he's in LA and he's doing big things. So props to him. I want to throw that out there. But a quarterback that I will just throw out there as one that I think is a sleeper this year would be the guy that did get Davante Adams this year, and Derek Carr. As well as an offensive-minded head coach in McDaniels. We're not crazy about McDaniels on the show, but it should help over the distraction that became John Gruden. So throwing that out there for the folks at home, like who's a sleeper quarterback? I think Derek Carr is one. Who would you say would be like a sleeper quarterback this year that could really do some damage?
Yeah, for me, I'm going to actually trickle back to Matt Ryan a little bit. I mean, you watch Carson Wentz have like success with that. It's a great offensive line. It's a great running back. I think a guy like Matt Ryan could be successful and make the right throws and be successful in that regard. Besides that, I mean, it's going to be very interesting, right? Because I feel like there's a major drop off in the quarterbacks this year as far as fantasy goes. So it's interesting, but I like your play of Carr there. He's getting his college buddy back, in Adams, back to the Fresno State days. So I'm sure that's gonna turn something in, right? Like they didn't get back together to just not do something. Like Devonta's gonna try to do some like NFL history type of stuff, right? So I like your play there. I think you can't go wrong actually with Russell this year. I mean, he's got a great wide receiver trio over there. Yeah, to me though, Matt Ryan, he's a sneaky good play. Maybe that's because I have him in Dynasty, so I want him to do well. So I just keep telling myself that. But yeah, I don't know. I think you muted you again.
I did. Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
I did it again. So I will say Russell Wilson is, I would say, one player like just booming. Like Russell Wilson was trending downward,
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah,
fast and hard.
I agree.
And the savior of that trade to his career, I think it could put him in that top five. And I love the fact that you threw Matt Ryan into the mix because Matt Ryan was trending downward hard as well. Two quarterbacks there that were trending downward pretty fast and pretty quickly based on the situations that they were playing within. So now they're in the AFC. They're a part of two teams that very well could make the playoffs. The AFC is loaded this season. It could be the best AFC that we've seen in quite some time. The NFC was wreck and shop for a while, but now the AFC's looking really stacked on paper. Colt, I really appreciate you coming on. This was an awesome show. I always like to have you on, and I'll be sure to get you on again. Folks, check him out. The Buffalo nerd himself. Buffalo Rumblings Podcast Network. Colt, shout out to the show. When are you going to be on again?
Yeah, man. Thanks a lot for having me on, Ryan. You guys can follow me, as you can see on the screen for those watching, those not watching, at Colt_Schroeder, or just look up at the Buffalo Nerd anywhere. Thursday nights live, on the Buffalo Rumblings YouTube channel, and then the show comes out in podcast form on Fridays. And like we do every week, we do highlight a charity. So, it's a cool, fun piece. During the off season here, I got some fantasy folks that'll be coming on a little bit as we kind of wander around the off season. It's mandatory camp this week, so things are starting to pick up and we're getting there, but kind of have a little more fun talking about some betting and some fantasy and stuff like that as we kind of move through the roster the rest of the way. So you guys can find me over there Thursday nights. Come hang out.
Yeah, it's an awesome time. Awesome show. Greatly appreciate you covering the team as closely as you do. I know I do, and I know the viewers and listeners do as well. So, Colt, thank you so much for joining me. As well, folks, to give you a little bit of a preview for things to come, I called this last year, the Buffalo Bills Offseason Primer, getting you primed and ready every week leading into the regular season, starting with Colt Schroeder. I'll have a new guest on next week, so stay tuned for more of the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. That is Colt Schroeder. I'm Ryan Thomas. Go Bills!